Welcome to the 12th annual Meet the Chiefs dinner, our signature evening celebrating public sector leadership and the collaboration that underpins the entire land and development ecosystem. So in your program, you will find the names and bios of more than 50 senior public officials joining us here tonight, a remarkable reflection of the breadth of leadership shaping our region. From its beginning, this evening has always been about recognizing these officials who we rely on to help guide our region and our industry through complex and consequential challenges, and to express our appreciation for that leadership. So with that, I'd like to ask, now that I've asked everybody to take a seat, if you're a public official, could you quickly stand up? And we'd like to acknowledge you tonight. We'd also like to recognize our table sponsors, and we begin by thanking our dinner sponsor, Times Group, for their generous support of this year's annual dinner. We also want to acknowledge and thank all our table sponsors for tonight's dinner, our largest ever. Many of you here are also ULI annual sponsors, and for that we are especially grateful. Your continued support enables the scale, quality, and research of programming across the region. Indeed, your support has allowed us to do something quite incredible. We're not only just keeping pace with the rapidly shifting policy and economic landscape, we're helping define what comes next, sharing leadership practices from here and around the world and spotlighting the leadership and innovation shaping the future of our industry. ULI Toronto is proud that in advancing the Urban Land Institute mission, global mission, we have continued to deepen our impact initiatives over the past year, strengthening our commitments to such things as Women's Leadership Initiative, the Accelerating Accessibility Coalition, Climate Change and Resiliency, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and our Truth and Reconciliation Journey, which we invite you all to join. You'll find more details about these initiatives on the back of your dinner program. We invite you to take a look. And it is in the spirit of that final commitment, our ongoing Truth and Reconciliation Journey, that I invite our first guest speaker. In lieu of the traditional land acknowledgement, we are honored to welcome one of our First Nations partners to open our program. Please join me in welcoming Warren Salt, CEO of the Mississaugas of the Credit Business Corporation, to offer opening remarks. Warren.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you so much for the invitation for myself to provide opening remarks on behalf of the Mississaugas Credit First Nation tonight. Ani, good evening. My name is Warren Salt. I am a member of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and also the CEO and President of Mississaugas Credit Limited Partnership. The Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation is the sole holder of treaties which are based upon Aboriginal title for a territory which takes up the majority of the Golden Horseshoe region. Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation occupied, controlled, and exercised stewardship over approximately 3.9 million acres of lands, waters, and resources within southern Ontario. The area covered by the treaties signed between the Crown and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation cover areas from Long Point on Lake Erie in the east to the Rouge River in the west to the Orangeville area in the north. Today, we are an area covered by Treaty 13, signed by my ancestors and the British Crown in 1805. It's an honor to welcome you on behalf of the First Nation this evening to the treaty lands and traditional territory of MCFN. We are grateful for the opportunity to gather with leaders who play such an important role in shaping the future of our treaty territory. MCBC was created to ensure the economic activity within our treaty territory includes meaningful participation of the treaty rights holder. Our role is to work along the industry, municipalities, and government to embed economic reconciliation into real projects, early, intentionally, in a way that supports long-term community planning and land stewardship. For planners, many of the principles you work with every day, long-range planning, responsible growth, climate resilience, and community well-being are deeply aligned with First Nations worldviews. For First Nations, stewardship of the land is not a policy objective, it is a responsibility carried across generations. Economic reconciliation, in this context, is not about slowing development. It is about doing development better, ensuring that projects are informed early by treaty rights, Indigenous knowledge, and a clear understanding of cumulative impacts. When this happens, projects are more resilient, more sustainable, and ultimately more successful. This evening is particularly fitting as MCBC announced yesterday the formation of a new partnership between MCBC and Arcadis, focused on the design, planning, and advisory services across our treaty lands. I would like to acknowledge Arcadis for their leadership and their shared understanding that First Nation participation must begin at the planning table. We see our work with planners and institutions like ULI is essential to the future of this region. The scale of growth across Southern Ontario demands approaches that balance development with stewardship, economic opportunity with responsibility, and short-term needs with long-term vision. Thank you again for the invitation, for the important work that each of you do. We look forward to continued dialogue, collaboration, as we plan for the future that honors our treaties and benefits who all live and work on these lands. Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech, Warren, we are honored to work with Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and specifically you and your colleagues at MCBC. Warren noted economic reconciliation. I'd be hooved to note that our furniture tonight has been supplied by Ojibik and Studio TK, Indigenous-owned furniture suppliers. Just a small way that you can see economic reconciliation opportunities. You're going to be hearing us over the coming years talking a lot more about that, so please join us. Shifting very quickly now to our keynote speaker. We are pleased to invite, and please give him your attention, Daryl Bricker, CEO of Ipsos Public Affairs, who we've asked to speak to his demographic and public research analysis for a few minutes under the title, The Toronto Region the Future Wants. After dinner, we will, of course, assemble our public officials panel to weigh in on Daryl's observations. So with that, Daryl, I'll invite you to join us here. Here you are, over here.
Thanks, Richard, and good evening, everyone. By the way, I really enjoyed that initial opening presentation by Warren. I thought that was one of the most refreshing things I've heard in a while on this very complicated issue. So, Warren, thank you very much for that. So what am I going to talk about tonight? Well, people and planning. So I want to focus on two things, demographics and public opinion. So why demographics? Well, because it's about us. We're actually getting quite good at measuring this. We were just talking about that. The decisions, most of them have already been made. You can pretend that you don't know what the future is like, but if you're understanding what's going on with demography, you very much do understand what the future looks like. They're projectable and they're facts. We know what they're going to be going into the future. And public opinion reflects demand. It reflects who wants what, and it's not just rational. What you're going to find with a lot of demand these days, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, it's emotional, it's based on expectations, it's based on information levels, it's also based on trust. And trust goes along with what all of you are doing. It's malleable. It changes given conditions, and by the way, demography underlies all of this. It's a very big driver of what people think about what's going on in the future and what they want in terms of the homes that they want to live in. So this is Canada looking at rural and urban distributions across the country. I know we like to say we're the true north, strong and free, but actually we're the true south, strong and free. About over 90% of us live within 100 kilometers of the US border. Over 80% of us live in an urban environment these days. But the truth is, we don't actually live in an urban environment as in a downtown environment. We basically live in a suburban environment. In fact, the most rapid growth in Ontario's population and the Canadian population has been in car commuting suburbs. By the way, that's also where people want to live. We've seen a declining downtowns relatively, and we've certainly seen the collapse of rural and small towns. So what are the fastest growing communities around here? Actually in Ontario in general, from 2001 to 2021, they're here. Milton, you're the award winner, you win the gold medal. I know somebody's here from Milton tonight. 322% growth over the last 20 years. Now we think that Toronto is growing considerably. Actually, the downtown of Toronto is not growing that much. It's only grown 9% over that period of time. So again, underscoring the point, where are people going to? They're going to the car commuting suburbs. So this number, if you want to tattoo one on the inside wrist of your wrist, it's the number that represents the replacement rate for the Canadian population in terms of fertility. It's 2.1. It's the number of children every woman during her lifetime needs to have in order to simply replace the population that dies every year. In Canada today, that number is 1.3. I expect Statistics Canada is going to announce that it's 1.2 sometime this year. Oh. Sorry, 1.3. This is Ontario. Actually, Ontario sits below the national average. We want to have one of the lowest fertility rates in the country. City of Toronto, even lower. In fact, Canada passed natural replacement rate in 2022. So if we had no immigration in this country, our population would actually be shrinking. This, everybody wants to see one of these before dinner, I know. You're allowed to laugh, that's okay. This is called a population pyramid. You go up the center, it's the ages of the population through time. This is Canada's population back in 1960. This is when we had a naturally replacing population. Our fertility rate wasn't 1.3, our fertility rate was almost 4. In fact, the average family in Canada back in 1960 had 4 kids. Today, the most frequent number of children in a household is 1. So when you start thinking about the houses of the future, the accommodation of the future, where people want to live and what their needs are going to be, this is what's going to drive what those things are going to be. This is the population today. So we've moved from that lovely population pyramid to something that looks like a population vase. In fact, our median age here is 41. Back in 1960, it was only 26. So we're not only getting less fertile, we're getting a lot older, and the population without immigration is getting a lot smaller. So what's happened is we've flipped the pyramid. And by the way, it's not just Canada, this is the Western world. If anybody thinks that this is going to be China's century, you can forget about it. Why? The Chinese population is going to shrink by half this century. It's going to go from 1.4 billion people to about 700 billion people. Still really big, but not anything that was like it is right now, and it is going to be a much older population as it does. So what's the most frequent type of household in Canada now? It's a person living by themselves. In fact, the picture at the top of this slide, all you people talking, you can take a look at the top of the slide. An older woman living by herself. So the most frequent type of household that we're going to have in Canada, and it's the fastest growing, is a person living by themselves. But interestingly, they don't want to live in a 500 square foot condo. But this is really what's happening in the world today. Our entire economic growth, everything that we've built in terms of infrastructure, has been driven by what we see on this escalator. In 1950, the global population was 2.5 billion people. Today, it's 8.2 billion people. It was a very young population that drove all of that need, all of that demand, all of that development, all of our economic growth. By 2040, or shortly after, we're going to go in exactly the opposite direction. Canada is going to be definitely in this phase by then. As I said to you already, we've already crossed the line in 2022. And what you see on the other side is the population coming down is much older. So I know all of you people are building all sorts of accommodation from old single people, right? No. No. But this is going to be Toronto. This is going to be the GTA. This is going to be Canada. How many of you are prepared for this? Because this is what's happening right now. In terms of issues that Canadians are concerned about, most important issue is in the country is housing. And why are they most concerned about housing? It is the aspirational middle class goal. It's not about numbers of houses. Nobody cares about the numbers. It's about the type of house. The type of house that I aspire to live in. People don't want to endure where they live, they want to celebrate it. And they want to celebrate their achievement. So whenever I hear people talking about the number of units we're going to build, it's just going over people's heads. They don't care. Is it the type of place that they want to live? That's the big question in their minds. And we've created a generational division in this country that's absolutely tragic. This is the first time in our history that young people are poorer than their parents were. We've got declining real incomes. Housing affordability, as I've just shown you in terms of public opinion, has become a national crisis. Young Canadians feel like they're locked out of home ownership. Politicians and planners talk about the future. Young people give you that face back because you're not solving their problem. And politicians aren't solving their problem. This is going to become a big issue. It already was in the last federal election. Intergenerational resentment is rising, and we have a responsibility to help deal with it, or we're going to have some very significant problems going forward in this country. Have I got your attention? Okay. Oh, great data. This is from our exit poll from the last federal election, which we interviewed 9,000 voters. Owning a home in Canada now is only for the rich. 70% of people between the ages of 18 and 34, and the people who've tried the hardest, the people between 35 and 54, say that's absolutely true. So we're not building what they can afford. And one of my favorite stats of all time that tends to stop the room cold, and let's see if it does this tonight. Percentage of Canadians between the ages of 20 and 34 in selected cities who live with their parents. In the Greater Toronto area, it is half. Similar numbers in other places, but in Ontario, Toronto, it's half. Yeah, and I know you want them to move out too. This is an eye chart, but I'm going to make it real simple. This is data that we did last year. I'm at Ipsos, so we're a global company, so we do global research all the time. This is asking people the type of house that they would like to live in. And guess what? In Canada, it's not apartments. It's either detached home in the suburbs, detached home in rural areas, inner city detached home. We're not really that interested in apartments. There is a population that is, but it's not even close to the majority. In fact, I'll give it to you in a little easier to read. Detached, 2/3. Apartments, less than 1/3, just over 1/4. Why? Because they want to grow up in the house they want to live in the house that they grew up in, and they no longer feel that they can afford it, and that's what's driving this generational resentment, because it means that the middle class is not achievable. So, some thought starters to generate some additional conversation around your tables. You should stand when you applaud, please. For planners, we're managing a transition in this country that we have never dealt with before. There has never been a time and Canada in which the Canadian population has actually declined. It's now doing that. So if you still think you're on that escalator and it's going to be driven by population growth, think again. The second thing is we built communities for the population of the past. In the 1950s, we were building Don Mills. Younger, larger families moving up the housing ladder, that population is going away. The growth hasn't disappeared, but it's moved outward to places that are not designed to absorb the population growth at the speed and scale that we've been experiencing. Ask our friends in Milton. Demand is for the right space, in the right place, at the right price. Housing to aspire to, not to endure. Whenever I hear about these modular things that people want to build and, more stacks of this and stacks of that, do you want to live in that? Neither does anybody else. It's what you will put up with if you have to. It's not what you aspire to. The market is increasingly driven by older Canadians with assets, expectations, and different needs than a younger population. How are we going to heal this generational divide? A good place to start looking is at housing. It's about alignment, not just supply. It's not just about numbers. It's building to match our infrastructure to match the population that we're going to have. And finally, and I bet you're glad you're hearing that word, finally, the future needs precision, not just volume. Thank you. Good night.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. I did mention that there's going to be a test afterwards, so I hope you all took careful notes. No, thank you very much, and I appreciate you working through a tough crowd. But we're now turning to dinner, which will be for the next almost an hour. We'll be back at 7:45 with a special awards presentation and a leadership announcement and our planners panel. So we'll see you shortly. Thank you. If people could just take their seats, because we got a couple of really exciting final parts of our program ahead of us, and I want to make sure we give it due attention. Very exciting, in fact. It's now time to shift our presentation to the ULI Americas Award of Excellence. And to present this award, and you're all going to be very, very quiet, because I'm going to bring Michelle Ackerman, who is the the governance chair of ULI, and with the Kilmer Group. She's going to make the exciting announcement of the Americas Award. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Richard. It's my great honor to present the ULI Americas Award of Excellence to another Toronto project, making this 2 years in a row for this prestigious honor. The Urban Land Institute Americas Award for Excellence recognizes the highest standards of achievement in land. There's feedback, right? Okay. Achievement in land use, celebrating projects that demonstrate innovation, design excellence, and meaningful community impact across the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Selected from a highly competitive field of submissions across the Americas, this year's winning project stands out for its ability to integrate diverse uses, respond to complex urban challenges, and deliver lasting value for its community. Waterworks exemplifies this ambition, revitalizing a historic Toronto site through adaptive reuse, thoughtful design, and a commitment to social inclusion. By blending heritage conservation with new residential community and public space, it breaks down barriers and redefines what a complete community can be. It is now my pleasure to present the 2025 ULI Americas Award for Excellence to the Waterworks Consortium, Mod Developments, Diamond Schmidt Architects, and Woodcliff. To accept the award on behalf of the Waterworks Consortium, I'd like to invite to the stage Nurez Lalani, President of Mod Developments, Gary Switzer, CEO of Mod Developments, and Donald Schmidt, Principal, Diamond Schmidt. Congratulations, Waterworks.
Congratulations once again, and we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that this was also a project on City of Toronto land, and there are so many people in this room who worked on this file. I'm staring at you, Greg Lantern, but all of our colleagues at Creatio, at Build Toronto, myself included, congratulations to you all. And I hope that we keep this streak going. I understand there's actually 2 more GTA projects on the judging stage. Good evening, everyone. My name is Salima Raji, President and CEO of the York University Development Corporation and Chair at ULI Toronto. I have a short but exciting and special announcement to make this evening. As I wind up my 2-year term on the executive with my colleagues Tricon's Tobias Ariwal, PwC Canada's Ali Abbas, and Northcrest Christy Shorthall, I am pleased to announce that the next executive team, effective July 1. But before I do, I just want to express my gratitude to the executive team that served with me for the support that they gave me and our ULI Toronto colleagues over the past very challenging years for our industry. And I include in that our management committee, thank you so much, and in particular, the team at YUDC who allowed me the time to dedicate to this organization. I want to take a moment to acknowledge their presence here today. The York University President, Lisa Phillips, and the Chair of YUDC and former Chair of York University, Paul Saparis, who are at table 19 today. Thank you. Remarkably, in these challenging times, ULI Toronto has continued to thrive in our mission to deliver industry value and impact, including this year's annual dinner. Did we tell you that it's the largest ever? Thank you. So, on behalf of my colleague Michelle Ackerman, Chair of the ULI Toronto Governments Committee, I am pleased to announce the new chair of ULI Toronto will be Christy Shorthall. Christy is Executive Vice President at Northcrest Development and brings 20 years of leadership experience in the ULI Toronto in the range of capacities going back to our district council's earliest years and to today, the large chapter that we've become. This experience is perfectly suited to guiding ULI in our next chapter of growth and impact, and I was thrilled to have your appointment as our next chair, Christy. But that's not all. Christy will be joined by 2 other key leadership appointments on the ULI Toronto executive. We have from Castle's partner Signe Lisk, who will take over as vice chair. and BDP Quadrangle's Ozzy Ariwell that will join as chair of mission advancement. So I'm told I have to leave the announcements for now. We have to shift to our panel. But one more round of applause for Christy, Signa, and Ozzy. Thank you very much. So as we move into the final portion of tonight's program, I'm pleased to invite Hamid Gadaki, Principal and Senior Project Manager at the Times Group, to the podium.
Thank you, Salima, and good evening, everyone. As Salima introduced me, I'm Hamid Gadaki, Principal and Senior Director of Development at Times Group. On behalf of the team at Times Group, we're pleased to be this year's Chief Planner dinner sponsor. Times Group is a fully integrated development company with more than 4 decades of experience shaping communities across the Greater Toronto Area. From custom homes to large-scale mixed-use developments, our work reflects a commitment to quality, sustainability, and thoughtful urban planning, delivering places where people can live, work, and thrive. This evening, Times Group joins ULI Toronto to express our sincere appreciation to the public officials in the room and across the GTA, whose leadership, professionalism, and collaboration with the development community are essential to meeting the challenges of delivering housing. In a moment defined by economic uncertainty and market constraints, that partnership has never been more important to advancing complete, resilient communities for the region's future. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite our public official panel to the stage. And I will now hand the proceedings over to Sabine Matheson, Partner and General Counsel, Strategy Corp, who will moderate this session. Sabine?
Thank you, Hamid. Well, it's great to be back here for a third time to see just how many cheap transgender jokes I can work into a discussion about planning in Toronto. I've got a terrific panel with me. For those of you, I think there were sort of 2 reactions to Darrell's comments earlier. One was so interested in what he said that people started talking about it immediately, and the other was, oh, there was a speaker from Ipsos? But we're here to do a sort of a previously on Game of Thrones and fill you in on what he said, but talk about it and help bring it to life for you. Darrell is really one of the world's leaders in polling. Ipsos has an international footprint, and he's a huge Canadian champion working internationally. We also have Jill Hogan from the great town of Milton, city of Milton, fastest growing place, as Darrell told us, in the GTA. We've got Deborah Gianetta from Richmond Hill. And then coming in 3rd place in rate of growth, but leading the league in personal height statistics, we have Jason Thorne from the city of Toronto. I was actually going to suggest that we stand or sit in an order of height in such a way that would model the population graph. And I think if we were to all stand, we'd be able to rearrange in the way that we would like to be. But regrettably, as Darrell said, we have some problems. And Darrell, maybe you could just give us a quick, previously on Game of Thrones, if you were going to say, what are the 2 biggest takeaways that you think we should be talking about tonight from your presentation?
I think the first thing is understand how the population is changing and what effect that is going to have on demand. And the second thing I would say is that it's not necessarily about volume as much as it is about precision and trying to meet what that emerging market demand is going to be.
So I want to turn it over, get the panel involved here, because we've got municipalities that are dealing with what Darrell was talking about, each in their own specific context. And so, I'm going to start with you, Jill, and I want to ask, was there anything in Darrell's presentation that stood out to you as helping us better understand the current conditions that we're dealing with and the things that you're experiencing in Milton?
Absolutely. So Milton has a few crowns. One, fastest growing. Two, we have the country's longest serving mayor. He has been in office for 60 years. He's been mayor for 45 years. He is an incredible legend, and he is running again in the municipal election in October. And third, and I think this is very relevant to Darrell's presentation, is another stat and another new title for the town of Milton that was illustrated in the Toronto Star last week. We are also the highest mortgaged community in the country. And when I say that, I mean the highest level of debt mortgage as well as the most mortgaged in the country. So what does that tell you? I do think it aligns with what Darrell was saying and the desires of the market right now. I mean, when people are stretching and doing such gymnastics financially in order to own a home, it really tells a story. So it tells the story that the demand is there and people are willing to do a lot in order to get there. Something that we've also seen in order for that dream, record number of basement apartments. And the reason for those basement apartments is to assist with the mortgage payments. Now in Milton, we're building complete communities. As you know, many of the Toronto people just think we're large lot, single detached. That truly is not the case, but there's a very strong demand for that. What I think is interesting about Milton, we're very well positioned to meet the needs of various markets, but we have a tremendous land bank. We just received over 4,000 acres of an urban boundary expansion that will take us to 2051. So we have a lot of land moving forward. I think I'll leave it at that for now.
So, Deborah, was there anything that struck you particularly about what that relates to what the work that you're doing on a daily basis?
So it explains a lot here in the city of Richmond Hill. I took a look at some stats, and I think it was about 44% of homes in Richmond Hill are actually single-family detached. And it actually speaks to what Darrell was saying with respect to the dream, right? The dream is very much alive for that single-family detached home ownership type of target that everyone's trying to get to. And that's very much explained while we've kind of stagnated in terms of our growth, because we don't have any greenfield left in Richmond Hill, very little. We're building out our last area in North Leslie. So there's very little left in terms of greenfield to attain that single family detached dream. And we're turning more toward the urban type of development on our centers and corridors. We have a TOC, a subway hopefully arriving mid-2030. So I think we are shifting to the urban type of growth, notwithstanding we still have a very stable ground-related development community in Richmond Hill.
Jason, how about you?
I think for me, it just kind of hammered home the complexities that we're all dealing with, and like these competing forces kind of pushing and pulling the market right now and trying to wrap our heads around that. And the presentation, I think, just kind of scratched the surface. It was talking about demographics and housing, but of course we're also planning for employment in a vastly changing employment market and the changing nature of commercial and retail, and in a place like Toronto with the importance of the healthcare sector and post-secondary and how demographics are changing all of those things. It's just kind of this complexity on top of complexity that just makes it a challenging world to be a developer and a builder in, and a challenging world to be a planner.
Yeah, and Darrell, just picking up on what Deborah was saying a second ago about the dream. One of the things that Minister Flack has in his common set of messages is that everything they're trying to do is restore the dream of home ownership. I mean, you've been an advisor to politicians all around the world for 30 years. Is he on the right track in his messaging when he's talking about that?
Yeah, well, if we don't find a way to satisfy that dream, you're going to see the intergenerational resentment that we were talking about in the presentation continue to rise. There was a reason that younger people voted disproportionately for the Conservative Party in the last federal election, which traditionally they never do, and it's really because of their dissatisfaction with this. This is just one element of this feeling that they're unable to make the leap to realize the Canadian dream, which is, for most people, kind of a middle-class existence in which you have the type of house that you want to live in, the type of job security that you believe that you've earned, and the ability to raise the limited number of children that we're having these days. But so what we're dealing with here is not simply a question of infrastructure and accommodation. What we're really dealing with here is a psychological satisfaction where people feel that that this is what Canada is about, this is what you should be able to achieve, and when it's denied them, they get quite angry.
And that's a really interesting point, because those of you who would have watched the election last year, the federal election, would remember, I guess it was probably during hockey, you'd see the same Conservative Party ad again and again and again. And it had the two old duffers at the driving range. And one of them was saying, I had to help my daughter with her down payment. And the other was saying, my son, I've had to bail him out financially. And that was the ad that was causing heartburn in the Liberal Party campaign headquarters, because that was where Poilievre's vote was driving from. And it was really interesting in the polling. You could see how people who were most concerned about the international situation, they were firmly with Carney. And those who were most concerned with the impacts on personal pocketbook issues, and particularly this intergenerational wealth question, they were the ones who were going with Poilievre. And you can see how near run a thing it was. So this is really what Daryl's talking about. The question that we asked in our Strategy Corp Chief Planners poll and survey, which I'd urge you to take a look at, because you only get to hear from a couple of them tonight, but one of the things we were so fortunate about in our survey was we got to talk to about 35 chief planners. And that's on our website. You can take a look at it. But the question that we asked was, what do you think is the most important function that you have as planners? And one of the answers that stuck out for us was, I think the biggest decision we have as planners to make is that a good development or not? And if it's a good development, how do we make this work? And if it's not a good development, how do we change it into a good development? And I wanted to ask you, Jason, does Daryl's research make you think about the ever-changing definition of good? Like, what is good? Good for whom? In what way? How do we know?
I think for me, it kind of hammers home that sort of the essence of good planning is in resilience and flexibility, and not putting all of your policy eggs in one basket, and thinking about creating lots of different types of housing opportunity for different types of housing and across the city, and maybe making planning a little less about trying to predict the future and just kind of enable the many possible futures that may happen. Because I've seen polls and demographic projections and those things change and vary over time, especially when you look at market preference. And I think what good planning needs to be is to not try to predict and hope you get it right in terms of which of those futures we actually realize, but actually just create that kind of variable and flexible opportunity across the city. It's a journey that Toronto's been on for a while, started under my predecessor, Greg, in sort of moving beyond this notion of let's try to focus growth in just a small handful of nodes and corridors and the rest of the city is off limits. And start to think about, no, that's not what the market is asking for, and that doesn't give you the kind of resilience to respond when market preferences shift or when demographics shift. So how do we create lots of different types of opportunity in different parts of the city, so that we aren't, as I said, we're not trying to kind of predict exactly what's going to happen, but we have a policy environment that can respond to many different circumstances.
What do you think? What's good?
Well, I'm going to answer it in a little bit of a different way. I have found that the best projects result from partnerships. And I always view the development industry as a partner. And when we enter into a partnership, good things happen. And whether it's, you know, what we can deliver on our end in terms of faster timelines, they can actually deliver great product as well. And I find when you work together like that, it's very successful. And as a municipality, you can also negotiate other things, like additional parkland. When you can negotiate other things based on a very clear path for a development approval, good things happen and good planning happens.
Partnerships are popular. Deborah?
So I would agree with Jill wholeheartedly. I think that having those very difficult conversations, finding that middle ground to so that the community wins and that the builder can really focus their energy and efforts in helping the city build a good community is really key. From the policy side, I would say that, you know, we're just hot off the presses with a new comprehensive zoning bylaw that replaced very old, antiquated, 44 antiquated bylaws. And I'll say that the approach in that bylaw was establishing permissions as of right, so that the market can respond in the way that it can. In the suburban context, it's a little bit different. There's still a lot of resistance to multi-forms of housing in neighborhoods. They still tend to want singles here, semis here, townhouses here. So I think that the comprehensive zoning bylaw that the City of Richmond Hill has established has created some as-of-right flexibility to respond to the market, and I think that also helps as well.
Well, let me see if I can lower the tone here slightly, though. Think about the Spice Girls for a second. In their epic hit, what do you want? Do you really, really want? Do you really, really want? Do you really, really want? Daryl, you ask that question all the time. Now, Daryl is not regularly confused with the Spice Girls, but he does ask the same question through Ipsos channels all the time. What do people really, really want? And when you ask them, do you sort of hear what these guys are talking about?
Well, I'll tell you what they want, what they really, really want. When it comes to housing, it's pretty clear. I mean, it's one of my favorite studies that we've done when we looked at what people look at as their ideal home in 30 countries. And Canada's not the highest on suburban detached houses, but it's pretty high on suburban detached houses. And you see that the communities that people live in, the countries that they live in, they have different cultural aspirations for housing. So, for example, in a place like Korea, people want to live in an apartment in the city. I mean, it's very clear what they want. For people who are living in a place like Italy, also, they're looking for things that are more of an urban type of accommodation. So I think it serves us well to understand what the nature of demand will be. And it's, as I said in my presentation, it's not always rational. It's emotional, it's cultural, it's aspirational. It's the vision that they have of the house that they want to celebrate and really enjoy, not the type of living where they're forced to endure something that they don't want. So I think that anybody who's in the business of trying to accommodate public demands, yes, I think there has to be a realistic conversation about what's affordable and what's possible and all the rest of it. But just simply saying you can't have that is going to lead to the other problem that I mentioned. So this idea of a diversity of options, I think, is absolutely clear. I think trying to predict what the future is going to be difficult. But the one part that I did tell you about the population aging and declining, there's no way out of that. That is just going to happen. It's already baked in. There are the decisions that your grandparents made, there are the decisions that you've made, decisions that your kids have made. So that is just going to be something that we're going to live through. But there's tons of opportunity within that context to both prosper if you're in the private sector and also in the public sector to actually start thinking about it and getting ready for it. And what I find too much, I think, in terms of the conversations that I have with a lot of people in this area these days is we still think that what existed before is what's going to exist in the future, and it's just not going to. And that includes the people who are talking about the kinds of housing that they want. I mean, if you're 75 years old, do you really need a big single-family home for yourself? I mean, that might be your aspiration, but maybe there's something else that will better meet your needs. So I think there's going to be quite a robust conversation about all of these topics as we try to match whatever it's going to be going forward in terms of accommodation to the nature of the population that we have and the changing aspirations that we're going to see that go along with it.
Now, we're losing the gang over here, and I bet it's because of the Spice Girls. But so let me try the Rolling Stones. Because sometimes you can't always get what you want, but if you try real hard, you may find you get what you need. And I'm wondering, Jason,
can't
if
follow
you
that.
have the tools to help people get what they need, even if they can't get what they want.
Yeah, and I always, when I see sort of market preference surveys around sort of detached homes and that sort of thing, I mean, we're not going to be building a lot of new single detached homes in the city of Toronto. But I'd like to probe a little bit of kind of what underlies that, and if it's, you want access to green space, well, okay, so we've got to get really good at building excellent public realm and excellent parks and coming up with designs of buildings that provide for shared courtyards and these kinds of spaces. And if you're looking for, maybe you don't want to live on a main street, you want to live on a quieter street. So we got to open up opportunities then to create the kinds of housing forms people are looking for on those neighborhood residential streets. And all of the things, like affordability, obviously we got to find ways to bring down the cost of delivering housing in the city of Toronto. So like, it may not be that we're going to kind of figure out a way to build a bunch of single detached homes, but to understand the motivation and the preferences that lie within that, those are things that we can provide in Toronto if we think creatively.
What about you? You got the tools?
Pipes. We need pipes. And when I say that, I mean, we can approve development at a very quick rate, but the infrastructure, I know it's a broken record, but it isn't keeping up. And we have vast growth areas in the town of Milton even that are waiting for pump stations to be built or waiting for upgrades to water treatment plants in order to be developed. And we have landowners fighting for water capacity and sewage capacity and who goes first and who goes when. And I do think at times when you're, and in my world, I tend to work with very large landowner groups. And at times those landowner groups can, and sorry, I know many of you are in the room, but you can be your own worst enemies at times. And I do find that quite challenging when you're just trying to get development done, but you're dealing with the politics, with the individual players in the group, and everybody wants to go first. And that's quite challenging. It's different than in the city of Toronto. It's a different context, but we have land, we're ready to go, we process quickly, we have great relationships with the industry, but we need big pipes to come, and that is slowing us down.
Well, and for years, I used to say there was only one municipal finance joke. And doing some pioneering work with planners, we've now come up with a draft interim second municipal finance joke, which is out for consultation. But it's, have you heard that there's a new name for DCs? It's now you seize them, now you don't. So I'm just wondering if your first answer is pipes, and there's nothing municipal finance people like more than long-term orderly financing of asset management plans, because they're really fun at cocktail parties, and that's what they really like, and that's what they really want. But now they're not allowed to have them so much anymore, particularly, say, in Vaughan. What do you think? Like, if pipes are the problem, are we going to see enough money through the BFF fund and the $8.8 billion fund and the other funds which have not yet been named to give you the pipes you need?
Well, I mean, we've been in Milton, we've been meeting our housing targets. We've been getting our BFF funding.
She didn't know I was going to ask that, by the way. Yeah. No pressure, Jill.
No. There really isn't any pressure, but our mayor has been the longest standing mayor in the country for a reason. And that reason is because we have the lowest property taxes in the GTA. And he absolutely refuses to put the burden of new growth on the existing taxpayer. We've been meeting, we have a very good relationship with Build. We're actually doing a new DC bylaw right now, and when we first released the figures, our DC went up. Everybody freaked out. We've brought it down slightly. We're still one of the lowest, but we're certainly not in a position to eliminate our DCs at this time because there's no political appetite to put it on the tax base. Waiting to get more information with the new federal programs that are coming out, and we'll certainly, if that's applicable to us, we'll certainly go for it. But it's a push and pull, and you know, I have developers come into my office every day and saying, "Oh, when are you guys going to cut DCs?" And I said, "We're not right now." That's the story in Milton.
So Deborah, I'm just curious, thinking about the future, because really what as Darryl reminds us, demography tells us what's going to happen. So the question is whether we're going to be ready for it or not. Was there anything in Darryl's research that stood out as pointing in the direction that we should be heading next? Was there anything that shapes that?
So I think that if the research is indicating that home ownership is still the dream for many people, then how do we fit that into our current context? And I think that a huge factor is cultural dynamics in each of the cities that we represent here on the panel, as well as the stage of growth that we're at. So, you know, City of Toronto is at a very mature state of growth. You know, I would say Richmond Hill is, you know, maybe in its adolescence, you know, at that stage where we've built out our greenfield and now we're turning to more urban forms. And if the demand is that they still want grade-related home ownership, what does that look like in each of our municipalities? At the end of 2024, we passed a bylaw to allow 4 units per lot. We've had very little uptake. Since that time, we've had maybe 4. We've had a little bit more uptake in ARUs in general, but you know, the thinking, okay, well, we can still try and attempt to address that missing middle, ground-related, allow for development to happen within neighborhoods. I think that's where Richmond will focus in the interim until the market responds to high-rise development, which is kind of the next type of development that Richmond Hill needs and is working towards with our subway coming, et cetera. But it's that missing middle, 4-story walk-ups that can coexist in those single-family detached neighborhoods, really creating an opportunity to have that home ownership, but in a different form, is something that I feel that we need to work a bit more and work towards.
Jason, you've talked a lot about the need for flexibility and a diversity. Anything in particular that you want to work on or see we do more of in the future?
Yeah, we're doing a lot right now around the mid-rise scale. We're seeing a lot of market interest there, and so we're trying to create the opportunities to build that in many more parts of the city as of right in the zoning. And then a lot of the work that we're doing right now is actually looking beyond permission and looking beyond zoning and start to actually dig into pro formas to understand what are the things that are still getting in the way of making that scale of project pencil. We've had lots of actually good meetings with builders in that space, even with some of the people who finance the builders in that space, to understand what are some of the requirements the city has, the standards that we might have that contribute to the cost of delivering that scale. If you're interested, we actually have a report that went public today that goes to council next week on this issue, where we're just trying to understand, so, you know, on the premise that it's not enough just to say that it's allowed, you actually have to make it viable, and we're trying to get into those kinds of issues now.
Jill?
We need a new GO station. And I'm working with some people in this room very hard to get one. And it's been a challenge, but we're getting some traction. The whole concept would basically be a new MTSA in a greenfield. We're talking about Trafalgar in the 401 area, basically right across from the Toronto Premium Outlet Mall. I'm sure most of you know where that is. It's in Halton Hills, not Milton. But to build off what Jason was saying, just in flexibility, we're going to have to be very flexible and thinking long term. And also, we've been really working on Metrolinx to think a little bit differently as well. And if there's Metrolinx people in the room, hi. When we first started this journey, we were presented with a project that was going right down to the tiles being used in the station bathroom. And we're simply not there yet. We need a train to stop, there be a platform, then we can start building this community around it and getting the density there. But we don't need the caviar up front. We just need those chicken nuggets to get out of the gate, to have that platform and get things going. And it's a real goal of mine in my career to make that happen.
So look, we've just, oh yeah, please. So I've just got one last question. You know that this is like the classic lesbian trans woman side shave, right? And so I want you to know I get my hair cut twice a year, and I did it to be here with you tonight because I knew that Daryl was going to have a bunch of graphs, and I wanted to have a graphic representation of two things. One was the state of new construction in the city, which is depicted here, and the other is the pace of new legislation and new rules. And you see, I did that entirely without PowerPoint. I just want to demonstrate.
Use props, though. Use props.
So, and props to you too. But what I was going to say is, when we think about the pace of change and the complexity of what we're dealing with, and I think the amazing thing is this is a room full of people with empathy for the plight of this sector. Everybody cares about this sector. Everybody wants solutions for this sector. And yet, in the last couple of years, we've seen the diagnosis of the problem be, oh my goodness, the costs are going up and we need to build lots more. And Daryl just came in and said, the population isn't going to be changing at the rate we thought it was, partly because of changes in immigration, partly because of the children that we're not having. And, you know, the interest market or the interest circumstances changed, and then they changed back, and now they're maybe changing again. But you get this real sense of incredible dynamism in the circumstances we're trying to solve for. And yet, I wonder if our policy framework is keeping pace with the conditions around us. And I'm just wondering, do you think the new policies we're getting, as depicted on this side, are they keeping pace with the market conditions that you're trying to manage? I'll start with you, Jason.
Yeah, and I think back to my earlier comments about, policy can't always be chasing market forces, which is why, I think to the earlier question about sort of the premise of good planning is just don't try to do that. Don't try to be overly predictive or prescriptive about what's going to happen. And that's why I think it's so important. What we've been trying to do in the city right now is to proactively upzone, 120 transit station areas and 300 kilometers of avenues, and I don't know how many thousands and thousands of parcels of neighborhoods to permit many different forms of development. So we aren't trying to worry about, did we get it right? Did our prediction come through? We're just creating a lot of possibility out there so that builders in the industry can respond as needed, and we aren't always trying to kind of chase the market with policy.
So I would say that it's a bit different. I would say that on our side, I would say the policies have forced some cities like Richmond Hill to take a good look at what we were doing and change it. And we really have tried to make efforts to change kind of the business, how we do the business. The other side of the policy framework doesn't really respond, though, to the demographic demand that Daryl was speaking about. It's really pushing us to the towers, to the higher condo market, which we've seen is right now quite stagnant. So it's pushing us to build houses, but there's no building permits being issued for that type of development. So where is it next? And I think that, you know, Jason mentioned that the report's going forward for a mid-rise, and I think really that's kind of the key, and the policies need to more focus on different built forms in existing neighborhoods, you know, create opportunities for infill, and maybe push the policy framework in that direction so that we can achieve some of the demand. And later, when the market comes around, we'll focus on the, you know, up and not out.
Jill?
I think some of the new legislation has been helpful. I mean, it has been changing quite frequently, but one of the, it's positive and negative. The lack of municipal comprehensive reviews now, certainly for a lower tier municipality like Milton, we are, you know, masters of our own destiny in some ways now, and not necessarily having to rely on regional government and other municipalities within that region to vote for what we want. Something that is good and bad is the ability for privately initiated urban boundary expansions. And that's something that I am struggling with because, as I mentioned earlier on, we did receive from the province I think the largest urban boundary expansion in the GTA anyway, well, in maybe on Ontario, I'm not sure, but it was over 4,000 acres. And we went through quite a process to get there. It was very political, but the right decision was made, and we have a great inventory of land that will get us to our planned population to 2051. But now we have the Me Too's coming that weren't part of that original urban boundary expansion, wanting to come in and making new, larger urban boundary expansions on top of those ones when we're waiting for the infrastructure for the first urban boundary expansion, and there's expectations that can't be met. So for me, like, the flexibility is good at the local level and local decision making, but sometimes opening up that opportunity causes issues for developments you already have in the pipeline. And that's something I'm struggling with because it diverts servicing, and water and sewer is critical.
So we have just a moment left, Darrell, so the last word to you. Planning is an inherently political thing based on everything you've heard tonight and the data you've seen. What's the best piece of advice you have for the gang out here?
Well, get out of your office and get out on the street. Talk to people, look at what's happening. Everything that I've talked to you about today in the presentation, you will see evidence of it everywhere. And if you roll back the camera a little bit and start thinking about what's going on from a bigger perspective, you'll see evidence of all of the things that we were talking about today everywhere that you want to take a look. The question is whether or not you want to get ahead of what's going to be happening. Granted, you can't predict everything that's going to happen. That's absolutely true. That's a really good observation. But there's a fair amount of this that's kind of baked in and is just going to happen. The question is whether or not we're preparing for that market. Because, you know, at the end, Sabine, you got to get satisfaction, like the Rolling Stones.
But, you know, perhaps that also leads us back to Carole King. Because, you know, I believe I felt the earth move under my feet when I was listening to your presentation, Darrell, and I think you all have to be. If
It's
you're
too
gonna
late,
get that,
baby. It's too late.
if you're going to get that earth moving, you're going to have to look how it's moving under your feet. Ladies and gentlemen, can I have a big hand for your panel?
Well, thank you all, and thank you, panel. Really, that was an incredible panel. I think the 1-2 punch with you, Darrell, was great. Deborah, Jill, and Jason and Sabine, that was just an incredible job of pulling together a lot of threads. So thank you for that. Thank you to all of you for being here, especially our chief officials, for whom, again, this dinner is an honor of. We really appreciate all that you do for us. Your colleagues, I think you did you proud today, and thank you to all our sponsors making this great dinner a success 12 years running. So with that, and also, sorry, I have to thank my staff. A great big please, applause for Alex, Jenny, Laura, Manisha, and Faith. You know how big a deal this is. Thank you. And to our volunteers who made this, who came early, who've been working hard. So it's been a lot of thank yous. But with that, we invite you to stick around and socialize, and we'll see you next year. All the best.